Welcome to Longevity.Technology Unlocked, where we crack open the science that could help you live a longer and healthier life. So I'm Phil Newman.
And I'm Dr. Nina Patrick. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion because we're sitting down with not just an athlete, but also an engineer. Lucas is the perfect combination of someone who fine-tunes machines for performance and also treats his own physiology like a high-performance system.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting because if anyone's got something to teach us about stress, speed, and longevity, it's someone who literally optimizes all three for a living. So excited to jump in.
Me too. This is longevity science, essentially with a steering wheel.
Yeah, which brings us to today's guest. He's a Formula E world champion, a former Formula One driver, an entrepreneur, a sustainability advocate, also a Le Mans driver, a UN ambassador, and a Harvard alumni, and one of the most forward-thinking minds in performance engineering.
He's spent decades pushing the limits of the human brain and body under extreme conditions, and he brings a perspective on resilience, recovery, and longevity that you just won't get from the lab bench. Lucas di Grassi, welcome to Longevity.Technology Unlocked.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure being here. If you guys are ever thinking about changing your profession to be my spokesperson, I would be very happy because that was the best intro I ever received. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's great. It's a pleasure, Lucas. And before we jump in, as a bit of a petrol head, can I just ask you a question? What's the best car you've ever driven?
Look, Phil, that's a lot of people ask me this question, and cars are a bit like food. I would say, like, what is the best food you can eat? It really depends for what's the purpose of the car. But in terms of racing cars, I have a very special car in my heart, which was the 2014 Le Mans car, which I finished second in Le Mans with that car. We were leading the whole race. For people that do not know what Le Mans is it's a 24-hour race. So the race starts at 3 p.m. on Saturday, finishes at 3 p.m. on Sunday, and who does most laps wins. So if you want to do a pit stop, it's your problem. If you don't want to do it, about 24 hours, the car has to withstand all this stress, and all the drivers. We were 3 drivers, and we were leading the race, and the car broke down with a few hours to go, like 2 hours to go. We were leading by 1 lap. It's quite a long way to lead, and quite a comfortable lead. And then the car broke down, the turbocharge broke down, and the mechanics managed to change the turbo under 12 minutes, and we finished second. So, and I have this car, and it was the highest, the record for the highest top speed at Le Mans for many years. I think for more than 10 years at 367 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
And the car was a beast. It was more than 1,000 horsepower, around, I would say, less than 2,000 pounds, so less than 1 ton. So the car was more than 1 horsepower per kilo. And the average speed over the 24 hours is around 250 kilometers per hour. So around 140 miles per hour average speed, counting the pit stops. So that's kind of my one of my favorite ones.
Well, that's amazing, Lucas. And I guess, when we start thinking about our conversation today, let's start with the physiology perspective, right? When you race, you expose your body to really intense heat, G-forces. I'd imagine rapid spikes in heart rate, and obviously the cognitive demand must be very intense. So there are a lot of very important stressors coming through your nervous system and your endocrine system. So when you prepare for that type of environment, do you think about the long-term biological costs, that's happening to your body, or are you just like super focused on the present moment?
Short answer is that you're super focused on the present moment. You prepare for that. So you're going to give it 100%. You're not going to save a single calorie there to try to win the race. You're going to just push it. But of course, if you're underprepared, you're going to suffer, because there are during the driving, there are 2 types of cognitive functions that are in action. Almost like that book. I don't remember the I read this book, but I don't remember the author, which is Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a quite a famous book, and that you have your conscious mind making the, let's say, the more complex strategic decisions, and you have your unconscious mind making, like riding a bicycle, right? You're thinking about where you're going, but you're not thinking about how to pedal or how to handle the bike. And when you're driving, the car is more or less like this. Like you're thinking, what is going to be your strategy, where you are in the race, how much risk you can take in that race. So like you're thinking about the strategic, and then you have your, let's say, unconscious mind controlling the vehicle, right? And racing, fundamentally, racing is you have a few inputs from your senses. You have to process that information, and your output, it's basically you steer, you accelerate, or you brake, right? Controlling the car, you have 3 outputs. So you have basically the visual and the inner ear G-force inputs. They are pretty much these 2. You have a little bit of sound, a little bit of a feel, but mainly are visual and the G-forces. You get these inputs, you process it, and then you have to do something. Either accelerate the car, or you brake, or you turn, right? So I had a company specialized in high-performance autonomous driving, and it was a very interesting way to kind of try to distill all the process of the mind and try to put it there. But in essence, if you're tired, you start making wrong decisions. And if you start making wrong decisions, it can cost, in racing, can cost up your life or the life of somebody. So it's very high stakes. So the physical demand and the physical preparation needs to be at the level that you don't get tired. It's not that you can finish the race tired. You have you have to finish with like a surplus of energy. So you know that you're making the best decisions at that time.
I wonder what biomarkers then that you're tracking to make sure that you're not losing that energy. Are you wearing like a continuous glucose monitor or anything like that while you race?
I use the glucose monitor myself a few times. I'm not diabetic. I use just to try to understand and trying to optimize my health. The one from Freestyle, I think it's called the Libre 2 or 3.
Yeah, the Libre 3. I'm a big fan of the Libre 3 as well. My dad's diabetic, so he uses it, and it's great.
It's great product. I use it a few times, but never in racing. Back then, there was not, when I was racing, well, I'm still racing, but when I was racing in Le Mans, my races now are more short. They are shorter. The Formula E races, they last 1 hour. And we still track it with a heart, mainly a heart monitor to track your heartbeat. And your oxygen levels in your blood, but the races are shorter. Back then, you could track the glucose. But what you do, we do a stress test with lactate, right? You go to a treadmill or a bike, you set your heart rate to see where you start your zone 2, or where you start actually creating acid lactic. The processing of acid lactic, when you start regenerating anaerobic combustion in your cells. So when you started to get anaerobic areas, that you start accumulating the lactic acid. So you know, based on your heart rate, where you need to be. And then you try to stay below that. So if your heart rate is too elevated, for example, sometimes it's too hot inside the car and your heart rate just explodes, you know that you're getting tired. You know that you're not going to last whatever 1 hour, 2 hours, or whatever is needed. So you try to, I would say the main difficulties while driving a very extreme car are the G-forces. You need to have a very structured core. Sometimes the arm, depending on the car, the steering is quite heavy. And then the heat. You have to cope with the heat, because on top of being hot outside, in the car you don't get so much air, and you're wearing fireproof clothes, which are very thick. So you don't sweat so much. So it's very easy to overheat. In some racing series, they use a cooling system, like a liquid cooling system, inside the racing overall, to try to take some of this heat out, especially if the car has an engine in front, like a NASCAR type of cars. They are the ones suffering with most of the temperature issues, to a point that it can melt rubber on your racing shoes.
Wow.
Oof. I imagine that's incredibly stressful on the body for a number of reasons. And kind of following up on what Phil was saying before, you have this like elevated adrenaline, you have this elevated cortisol. Obviously, everything's like pumping through your body. And I'm curious about have you seen how this is kind of like accumulated on your body as you've been racing for decades? Do you see that drivers in their 20s are recovering a lot faster than drivers that are in their 40s, and how they recover is changing as well?
Yeah, I think there is a correlation. I don't think has ever been studied in terms of age-related type of recuperation or stress levels. I think sometimes it's very personal, and for me, also depends on where I am in the championship, what type of stakes are there. Kind of, for example, if you are in a final, you barely sleep for a week, and then like if you're fighting for a title that is very important, then for sure you accumulate way more stress than if you're fighting for finishing 10th or 12th in the championship. So there are a lot of variable markers that I think has never been isolated to study what is aging, what is not aging. But the fact is that for some reason, that's another thing that hasn't been studied, and it makes me curious. Because it's not a physical thing, and in the standard tests I don't see a decline, but it's very rare to have drivers over 40s in the top categories of motorsport worldwide, especially Formula racing cars, which are the fastest ones. Like Formula One, I think there are only 2 drivers. In IndyCar, there is only 1 or 2 drivers over 40, and in Formula E, it's only me. So there is some kind of cognitive decline. It's not very clear what it is. But fun fact, I was looking at it the other day, and I found out that people playing video games are the ones that retire the earliest. And you wouldn't think that because there is no physical limitations, but there is some form of cognitive speed that is lost. So they retire when they're 25. They peak when they are 18, 17, 18, and they retire in their mid-20s. So I think there is a correlation to racing because you're talking about extremely fast decision making process and reaction times when you're controlling the car at that limit. But this is an area of science that hasn't been studied, as far as I understand, that nobody kind of understood that.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting when you consider like astronauts, they're living at another level of peak. And of course, we know that traveling in space really has long-term implications for them. But I was fascinated, Lucas, when you were talking about, your ramp up to an event, because of course, as you say, you've got where you are in the championship, is the car going to perform? Am I going to perform? So I guess that you're really getting to that point where the race is really this, peak stimulus for you. And I guess I'd be really interested to understand, how do you structure your recovery after that? You mentioned obviously, you're wearing monitors and so on, but do you kind of go, right, okay, the race is done, we either won or we came third, but we'll do better next time? You've got to off ramp, right? And I'm just interested to understand how you manage that to make sure that before you ramp up again, how do you manage that?
Well, if we win a race, especially before actually ramping up, you're still drinking the night to celebrate. So kind of gets
good.
Gets even
I'm glad
worse.
To hear I'm not alone on that one. Then.
It gets even worse than that, because then you're celebrating and you're hangover and you're stressed. Like, and it's the worst Monday ever after you win a race. Because it's just like a combination of stress, cortisol, alcohol. It's pretty bad. But jokes aside, what I would say that one thing that with aging, I kind of there is a good side and the bad side. The good side is that you understand your body better, so you understand what works for you and how you actually manage to make it better. And the worst side is that it takes longer, right? For example, jet lag. We travel a lot. Another problem we have, it's, for example, when we go we have a race in Tokyo, and 2 weeks later we have a race in Shanghai, and in between we have to go back to base to do the simulator. We spend hours on the simulator preparing the races. So you have to adapt to a 9-hour jet lag difference in like 2 or 3 days because you don't have enough time. So this with age, I feel that is getting worse. But then you have a more strict, a better protocol. For example, trying to avoid exposition to blue light in the time that you don't need the blue light. Try to go to bed and try to have the meals in the right moment. I don't consume alcohol 10 days before an event. And many other things. The supplements I take, the nutrition part also very important, the hydration. So we try to get all these procedures very. As time passed, I took it. I have to take it better and better, so I could compensate for the being on the road for 20 something years. But answering the question is after a race, normally we have time. Like I just had a race on Saturday. So basically Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, kind of try to do not so many exercises, just like recovery exercise, very low heart rate for longer periods. I like sauna, so I do sauna every day. Also trying to do a little bit of sauna to relax and to sleep better, try to sleep in the right time. But you know how it is, right? Then my daughter has fever, wakes up at 3 a.m. It never goes according to plan, right? But that's what I try to do, at least to recover, to try to have a good day, a good diet, and try to recover as best as I can the days following an event.
Yeah,
especially for my mind. It's the mind. For me, it's not the physical; it's the mind. Like I love playing chess, for example, right? I play chess. My games of chess after a race weekend, they are horrible. I always lose. I always lose ranking the days after the race. As far as I can try, there is a very clear correlation. Like my mind is just not there. And then after 2-3 days, it kind of gets better again.
Yeah, I can imagine that, because from a neuroscience perspective, what you're doing on the racetrack is truly extraordinary. You know, you're processing so much sensory input. You're making all this rapid motor adjustments. You're regulating your emotional response. You're staying cool under pressure. And most people literally can't stay calm in a heated conversation. And you're doing differential equations while going 200 kilometers an hour. So when your brain feels that extreme amount of fatigue, I guess, what are you doing in your training to prepare yourself for that fatigue?
That's a good question. I would say that is mainly the physical exercise, and then we spend a lot of time on the simulator. I think you have to drive. You have, for your body to get used to that, you have to be doing it either on the simulator. Now we have very good simulators that, like for example, like you mentioned astronauts, like the NASA astronauts, they train for months in simulators to get this muscle memory, to get used to that environment. And we do the same. We racing, we don't have so much testing. It's not like other sports like tennis that you spend 5-6 hours on the court every day. And doesn't matter if you're coming up or you're pro, you kind of every day you are on the court. Racing, we are not every day in the car. Like I drove my car Saturday was my race. The next time I'm going to drive my car is the Friday before the race in Mexico for half an hour. And then my race is the next day, because the car is during the championship, the car is going from point A to point B. It's in the ship. I cannot just take a car. If I take a car, I put it on a track, it's not going to make me better for Formula E in Mexico. I need to be there. So it's better that I use a simulator, and which I'm going to do, for example, next week. I'm traveling to Germany. I spend 4 days there. I do all the simulation prep, 12 hours a day, and then I fly back preparing Mexico. So we don't spend so much time in the car as people imagine.
Yeah, that's interesting to learn, because I guess it reflects a lot of our conversation has been about the mental preparedness and the stresses on your stress recovery and so on. But what I know that motorsport really places obviously a lot of specific loads on the body. You've got neck loading, all that micro vibration. I'd imagine spinal compression as well. So talk us through your optimization regime. How do you train, Lucas? Is it cardio resistance? I'm sure, but what are you doing? I mean, we see these reflex tests that obviously a lot of drivers do. So what's in your program?
So first of all, there is no evidence that you can train reflexes. That's actually quite interesting. Like it's almost like you either have fast reflexes or you're not. It's kind of, there is not so much training you can do, and there is a biochemical limit for reflexes that it just takes time to transform electrical signals in chemical signals and process them and forth. But yes, we do a little bit of hand-eye coordination with those systems and the balls falling and trying to kind of get your brain into the right state. I do between 1 and 2 hours every day. Heat and cold type of body regulation exercises. So I go to sauna, I go to cold plunge. That's actually very good for the body to regulate, to thermoregulate, which is a problem. I do a lot of core exercise. So a lot of isometric, like planking and this type of exercises to keep the core as stable as possible. One problem that we have is that the lightest the driver is, the better.
Okay.
Like a jockey, right? Like the car is pushing you. There is a limit. There is a minimum weight that if you're too light, you have to put weight in the car. But nevertheless, the lighter and smaller the driver, the better. So you don't want, and I'm quite tall. I'm nearly 6 foot. I'm tall. So for me, I'm heavy. I'm on the heavier side. So if you are overweight in racing, it's probably the worst you can get. It's like you're carrying extra weight around. So you don't want to get too strong as well. So like the weight has, at least for me, for some smaller driver, that's not the case. But for me specifically, I do more aerobic and more core exercise to try to match that. And yes, so also the aerobic is very important, because then your heart rate being lower than your lactate threshold, it's where you want to be. So for example, if some drivers, they have a very high heart rate while driving, so they have to train more because they have to be below their lactate threshold. Some other drivers, they drive very relaxed, so not necessarily they need to be well trained. They just need to be below their lactate threshold as well, which could be lower, but their heart rates are lower because they're more relaxed. So it really depends. I've seen a big variation. Another thing which is very interesting from racing is that under massive G forces, your heart rate almost stops beating.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so when you're pulling like 5G, 4G, your heart suffers quite a lot. And in racing cars, it's not like in airplanes or or astronauts that you suffer G for a constant period in the same direction. You can pull 5G to one side and then 5G to another side. So your organs inside your body are moving around and compressing your lungs and compressing your spine. So it is, you need to get used to it. If you,
yeah, I'm sure.
You kind of need to, if you can't just go from nothing and sitting and in a super race car. You have to go through the categories. You go like Formula 4, then Formula 3, then Formula 2. So you kind of get your body up to those environments, up to the moment you can drive those cars in the level that is required.
I get super motion sick, so hearing about those G forces from one side to the other literally makes my heart stop just thinking about the motion sickness.
Yeah, Nina, it's so extreme. Like, for example, when you're sweating, right? You're in the straight, and you're sweating. When you hit the brake, the sweat goes vertically to the windscreen. Because imagine that the sweat is coming down with 1G, right? You have a force of let's say in that small drop of water, it's 1G pulling down. When you brake, it's 4 or 5G. So the water just shoots up to the windscreen there. So yeah,
and then you can just watch them accumulate on your windscreen. You're like, that's all my stress.
Sometimes it's a problem. Yeah, sometimes depending how much you sweat, but it could be a problem. Yeah.
So in longevity research, we know that VO2 max and grip strength, and these are big, strong indicators of health span. But I'm really curious a little bit more about the biomarkers that would extend the longevity of a racer in motorsport. You mentioned this lactate and some of these biomarkers, but if you were, I guess, to focus on just three things, whether that's training or biomarkers, what would you give advice to maybe a younger driver on what they should focus on to extend their career as long as yours?
And not, well, taking care of their health as a holistic approach. You don't want to have an injury. Like, for example, once I almost lost a championship because I was playing football. I was playing soccer. I was playing football, and a guy came and kicked my leg and broke my fibula. And I kind of, in the middle of a championship, was a charity match, was something like. So first of all, right, be if you are growing up in the sport, if you are trying to be a pro, you have to be fit enough to race the next category that you're going to race. So if you're doing Formula 3, you need to be fit for Formula 2. If you're doing Formula 4 to Formula 3, why? Because you never know when the opportunity will come. And when the opportunity comes, you need to be ready. So it happened to me in 2005 in my first Formula 1 test. The official driver got sick. The reserve driver in F1 was, I think, had a problem also. It couldn't go there. So they called me in 2005, and I was not ready at all because I was not even thinking about F1 back then. I was in Formula 3. And I jumped in the car, and although I knew I could go faster, after a few laps, my body could not cope anymore with the forces. So I was losing performance because of my fitness. So one of advice, if I'm looking myself, if I could talk to me when I was growing up, it's like, be not fit enough to what you're doing, but fit for the next level. And then in terms of which attributes are better, you have to have a good eyesight. So taking care of your eyesight is very important. And then your mental state, right? Then let's say practical advices. So one book I wish I would have read before is about stoicism and the stoic and the philosophy of, like you said before, that you worry about how your car will perform and how you're tired. These are things completely outside of your control. And you should not worry with them at all. You should focus on what you can control and focus your energy and your effort in those areas.
So, look, I just ask you about, in relation to breathing, right? Because obviously breathing is one of the most easy things for us to do, but it's overlooked in variables in performance like CO2 tolerance, breath control, respiratory stability. All of these things affect focus, reaction time, and obviously emotional regulation. So do you consider breath work and
I do a little bit of breath work. I do. I didn't mention, but for example, before qualifying or before a very specific time during the race or so on, I like to go to a quiet place, and then I do a little bit of breathing and certain type of meditation you can call about, but it's basically trying to stay in a cool place, no sponsors, no guests, no media. I just sit down for like 15, 20 minutes. Our schedule it's very tough because there are always like the sponsor, the VIP area in the garage. So you have to give attention. It's not only the racing. You have a lot of commercial activities around, media activities. Sure. So before jumping in the car, I always go to my quiet place. Some drivers, they like to listen to music. I don't listen to music. I just go quiet. I do a little bit of breath work. I do a little bit of meditation, some kind of a brain type of exercise, just to focus myself in what I need to do. I think about what I need to do. So I do some mental preparation. So my plan A will be this, my plan B will be that. Normally it doesn't happen any of the plan A or B, but at least you have a clear direction of what you need to do if this happens, what you need to do if that happens. Because if then it happens, you know already what to do, or at least your brain is directed to that specific point.
Do you do any breathing exercises while you're driving? I imagine with the G forces, can you breathe?
You can breathe on the straights. So the straights, so you are very focused in driving in the corners, right? Where the car needs to be on the limit. In the straight is like it's a free time that basically you can do what you want. I don't do breathing exercise. Of course, you're breathing at the straight. You're trying to calm down and try to, if your heart rate is higher, but I don't even remember. You can drink in some races, like in F1, in Le Mans, the 24 hours. You have a drink, so you can press a button and drink some liquid in the straights, where you have like low G forces or no G forces at all. But during the races, you don't have the time, basically.
It's wild. It honestly sounds so intense. I want to ask a bit about something we talked at the very beginning. So a lot of performance research has been done on male physiology, on military populations, narrow age ranges, and we see that there's huge gaps. But when it comes to drivers, I feel like you guys are really doing experiments just on yourselves. What better science do you want to see from or on driver physiology in motorsport?
That's a very good point, because I think there are a lot of science to be done from using the scientific method perspective to get the average or get a random individual better. Because the problem is that the sample size is so small. We are talking about a few professional drivers. I would say there are 100 drivers in the world that are top level. Very, very top level. I'm talking like NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, Formula E, Le Mans, top series, and that's it pretty much, right? You have like 100 drivers there, but they're incredibly different. So for one works something, so has never been. There is a company in Italy that probably is the one doing the most scientific work into driving, and most of the drivers, they go there for their checkups or for their coaching, especially when they are young or becoming pro. It's called Formula Medicine. I used to drive for Audi, so we use the University of Munich. They used to do tests on us as well, but nothing different from what we discussed so far, and nothing in a statistic or double blind or nothing that has been, let's say, you can find the causation directly, right? There is a bit of correlation here and there, but it's just suggestive. There is no clear science on this.
It's very interesting, because obviously motorsport really is applied into engineering, which obviously comes out into wider population in mainstream cars and so on. And of course, you say it's a very small sample size, but I guess, you guys being so peak performance, there's probably some very interesting data in there. And Lucas, I was just going to ask you a little bit about your metabolic flexibility. It's obviously, the metabolism is an underlying part of longevity research, how the body switches between, glucose and fat utilization. So how do you manage your nutrition across these race periods and your training blocks? I mean, do you just have a standardized diet that's your baseline, or do you optimize pre and post race in terms of your nutrition and metabolic health?
During my career, most of my diet was for weight purposes, because like I said, I'm a heavy driver, so I was trying to actually even lose muscle at a certain point, because I needed to be light. It doesn't really matter. Some categories, it varies. Some categories you are like, this year I'm under the weight limit, so I have a gap of 7 kilos. I can fluctuate, no problem. So I could go 7 kilos heavier than I'm at now, and there will be no problem. And other categories, I will be 3-4 kilos overweight. So actually, I would need to, my body fat it's around 10% currently, 10%. So I would have to go to 7 or 6%. But when I get to that level, I start getting sick. You can maintain it. It's very hard. You're hungry all the time. Humor, it's complicated. So it varied through my career, but I would say that lately I've been following a more strict protocol, especially in the race day. And before, I used to eat much more carbs, and now I'm cutting these carbs away, and I'm keeping my hydration. I'm taking a little bit more supplementation with water and with salts and with isotonics, and less with carbs, and trying to eat a little more things that don't vary my glucose so much. So I don't have the peaks and the valleys that I used to have when for example, it was kind of the status quo and the common sense to eat a pasta before a race. And I never felt well, right? But my physio was like, no, everybody eats pasta, so you eat pasta. And I was like, okay, I didn't know better. So and now I feel that if I eat less, like during the race day, I don't eat so many calories. I try to basically try to stay hydrated. And there is a problem. That's another interesting fact, which is different from sports. You cannot pee in the car, right?
Okay.
So how you hydrate?
First rule of racing, right?
Well, if you have to, it happened already. So you cannot lose a race. It's like in a wetsuit. You just pee and just forget about it and see what happens. But it's not. You should not pee in the car, right? So how you hydrate is also, there is like for me, there is a very clear procedure, like how many liters, depending on what's the temperature outside, up to what point do I drink, and then I drink just before jumping in the car. So by the time I start sweating, I'm also absorbing the liquid I drank. So there is a very strict liquid protocol, let's say, during the race day. More liquid and isotonic protocol is more specific than food. Okay. Food, I could eat a little bit of chicken, some nuts. I could eat, I don't know, if there is a little bit of quinoa there, I can eat a little bit, maybe a protein bar. If we are in an exotic place that I don't trust the food so much,
We've all been there.
I will eat because you cannot get sick also, right? So I cannot get stomachache. So I prefer to eat a protein bar. So like I buy a few proteins bar, I eat a few days before, I see if nothing happens, and then I can take those protein bars to the race day. So this type of avoiding mistakes it's probably more useful than trying to optimize for every place that we go, right?
Got it.
What about supplements, though? I imagine drivers and your colleagues, you're experimenting with a lot of different types of supplements, amino acids, antioxidants, cognitive enhancers. What's in your supplement stack?
So racing is part of the WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency.
Oh, that's interesting. Gotcha.
So we have to be very careful, especially with the cognitive enhancer, like Adderall or something like this. This is you get caught, you get a 2-year ban. So there is a lot of substances, including substance. So it's the WADA list is a whole protocol for every sport. So there is a lot of things that makes no sense. Like, for example, for racing, taking the growth hormone, for example, will make no sense because you just get heavier and bulkier and it will be actually worse, but it's on the doping there. So you cannot take it unless you're recovering from some crash. Probably you have like therapeutic exemption use, like cortisone is doping, like the basic stuff. So we need to be very careful. The drivers, they don't use so many supplements. Probably, they use the basics, I would say. But I take a lot of care of supplements. Lately, I've been taking a little bit more care of my microbiome. So I'm taking supplements for the microbiome. So I'm taking very specific probiotics, prebiotics, and because you travel so much, also you need to keep those bacteria stable, because they will help you to kind of don't feel bloated, don't have any problem retaining the liquid or what. So the microbiome, in my view, became a bigger part. It's becoming a bigger part of the supplementation, which type of bacteria you have on your biome. And then I take supplements from when I'm off season or when I'm not racing. Like my next race is in 3 weeks, so I'm taking more supplements this week that are, let's say, for longevity or for antioxidants. For example, resveratrol, urolithin A.
This episode is brought to you by The Longevity Show, the global event empowering everyone to live longer and better right now.
So Phil, you're one of the founders. What makes this show different?
Great question as always, Nina. Well, unlike other events, the Longevity Show is open to everyone. We're running 2 tracks and a shared experiential exhibition. It's international. It takes place in London in June this year.
What great timing. London is so much fun in the summer.
100%. And there's the public festival style experience packed with evidence-based talks from world-class experts on nutrition, sleep, cognition, metabolic health. And then there's the full business track for those executives, investors, and innovators shaping the longevity economy, and for those newbies looking to jump in.
So you're saying it's part science, part business, part experience, and part celebration?
Exactly, Nina. With inspiring speakers, networking, amazing visitor experiences, and even an after-show party. The event is for the longevity innovators, experts, and community all to come together.
So how do people grab their tickets?
Well, just head over to longevityShow.com. Tickets are on sale now, and the early bird offer is still open, but not for long.
So don't miss out. Head over to LongevityShow.com and grab those tickets today.
You know, the industry in longevity, of course, is all about extending health span, which leads to longer lifespan. And one of the calibration points always is, you know, the difference between your biological and your chronological age. Have you ever done an age test before I ask my next question?
Yes, I did a methylation test to understand my chronological age. Oh, sorry, my biological age, not my chronological one. And this test that I did, they divided into different organs, right? Like which organ is whatever. And I was like 4 years average younger than my chronological age. But the organs, they vary. I don't remember by heart, but my brain was quite young. Was probably one of the youngest that they came back. I think my liver, due to the celebrations, probably was not one of the young organs I have in my body. So there was a bit of a variation on this.
Right.
I don't know. Well, there is this. So then I did this test in the US when I was there. I just did 1 month ago a full MRI scan in one of these companies. Actually, the company is a US company called Prenuvo. I did this microbiome test that is called Biome, VIOM. That actually, just as a disclaimer, right? I'm an early investor in the company Viome. I have some equity in that company because I really like this idea of that you have to measure first before actually taking the supplement. So I use Viome, but they only available in the US because in Europe and Brazil you cannot use them. So when I go to the US, I measure myself. But going back to the supplements, what I know exactly what I take. I take omega-3, not from fish, from algae directly because of the mercury, because of the lead. I actually have a considerable amount of mercury and lead in my blood that I'm trying to reduce because I eat a lot of fish. I eat a lot of tuna. So I'm trying to reduce that as well. So I take a multivitamin. I take creatine in capsules, but just a little bit of creatine because creatine is kind of, if I take too much, I retain too much fluid. I get heavier, which is something I don't want to do. So creatine, I take some as well. And resveratrol, Rolitin. I take curcuma, which is anti-inflammatory root. There is another root that I take, which is called Tonkat Ali, which is it binds to the SHBG hormone to increase your free testosterone. So it doesn't affect the testosterone; it actually binds to the SBG hormone. Yeah, I have a few, but it's not that I take. I take depending on which. For example, I do my blood test. If my testosterone the free testosterone has shrunk a bit, I take a little bit more. If it's in the area that I think is okay, I stop taking it. It's so I try again. I try to measure myself and then try to get to use my supplements in the right way.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I guess just reflecting back where I was going with my thinking there. Obviously you're averaging 4 years younger. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the optimization that you're doing, preparing for your racing, but also, of course, the stresses on the body. Do you feel that working at this high level enhances longevity rather than competes with it. Going back to the astronaut analogy that we had, we know that there are effects on them. Do you feel, with the optimization around being a racing driver, that that's good for longevity?
I think on average is good because you pay attention on your health, but there's a lot of things you do that are damaging your health.
Yeah.
For example, the amount of flying. Like I probably received more radiation than the great part of the world because I spent so much time in the plane, right? So this is damaging for my health, this jet lag, not sleeping properly, back and forth. But because I had to take care of my health since 20s, like I never smoked, well, compared to my peers, I drink occasionally in a very, very specific dates to celebrate. So there are a lot of positive things that the sport brought me, especially in the teenage years. What I say to my son and what I like about any competitive sport is that it helps, especially when you're a teenager and you're going through that phase that you're discovering parties, you're discovering, well, not in the US, but when you're a teenager, discovering alcohol as well, or early 20s in the US, you're discovering alcohol. That part of your life that you don't have enough experience discovering new stuff. If you have a sport that you have to compromise, you have to take care. Like the first time I had to do a diet to compete, I was 11 years old. And when I was 11 years old, I was a bit chubby and I had to compete in this world championship in go-karting. And my mechanic looked at me and said, "Hey, you're too fat. You need to lose weight." If you want to win,
I've had that as well, Lucas.
You
to be fair,
yeah, you could win the championship, but you need to lose weight. You're too fat. And you're like 11 years old. You're like, well, I don't even know this guy, this mechanic talking to me. So actually I went on a diet. I actually went to a trainer and I went on a diet and I was 11. So then you're ready. Like back then, when I was 11, I never ate a piece of salad in my life. And then I had to start,
and then not many 11-year-olds have though, right?
And then I had to start eating salad. I had to understand what was calories, and you have to like start having some resilience. So this part of the sport, I think, is even way better and more beneficial for your health span and your lifespan than the sport itself. And some sports, of course, we know the more energy you spend, the more stress you go through, the more oxidative stress you have. So I think, especially for some sports, like for example, I don't know, triathletes or marathon runners, the sport is actually counter beneficial for their lifespan. But of course, everything in moderation is good. But I think this beginning, trying to understand how doing any sport regularly will benefit on average. Kind of that's the message.
Yeah.
I agree. Definitely instilling those positive, healthy behaviors early on, especially getting an 11-year-old to like enjoy broccoli. That's really, like, but it's mom, it's for my training. I think that's perfect. Lucas, you mentioned that you're an investor in Viome, and yes, obviously you've worked at the intersection of performance, advanced technologies. You're looking at future technologies. If you look ahead 10 or 20 years, what emerging technologies do you believe will be meaningful to extend human performance and health span and lifespan?
Well, for me, this is the most critical technology that has ever invented by far is the AlphaFold 2 technology. This, I think we are in the beginning of understanding the repercussions of designing proteins and peptides from scratch. So I think this which won the Nobel Prize of Chemistry, I think last year or 2 years ago, right, was the first software to do so, which was something amazing. But that specific technology for me it's like a big leap on solving aging. I read a few books about AI. Of course, I'm not an expert, but I read Lifespan from Dr. David Sinclair. I read The Outlive, the Peter Attia. I read the one called Ageless by a British guy as well. I forgot the name of the author.
Yeah, Andrew Steele.
Andrew Steele, yes. And I spoke to them. Actually, I wanted to bring Andrew to Brazil. I spoke to him. And I spoke to David. When I was in Harvard, I tried to meet David back then in 2019, actually. I read the Lifespan, and I speak sometimes. I have David's WhatsApp, and I speak to him sometimes. Right? He became from 2019 onwards. He became a big celebrity.
That's
But
right.
I know.
try, yeah, I try to speak with him sometimes. Just to, because I think this field is really on the cusp of a big breakthrough, and I think the technologies like AlphaFold, like the idea that I think there are so much data out there that is not understood or not correlated or not still managed to get the proper analysis to understand all the, let's say, all the symptoms that encompass aging. I think that AI, this type of use of AI, will be very, very important, that will accelerate the rate of solving aging massively. So even in my group of friends, right, they always ask me, about this, about that, and I said, look, I think our sons, right, are being born today, they will probably not age, and everybody would like, what, you're crazy, and this, and you, whatever. They think I'm completely nuts. Well, they already think I'm completely nuts, but if I say something like that, they think I'm even more nuts. But I really think with the acceleration of understanding of what aging means, and how do you control really these entropic processes, I think we'll be able to either solve it, or at least stop it, or at least revert it in the areas that we think is important, or as they happen with stem cells, with these, but with proteins. But the technology is evolving extremely fast, and there is a lot of capital. Another thing which is very important is because there is a lot of investment now from Silicon Valley, and they understand that more capital also means more development. So I think we are in a very interesting stage in human, probably the most interesting stage in human discovery of the longevity and aging processes.
I mean, we live and breathe it every day, and that
Yeah, no,
excitement obviously is.
I'm preaching to.
Yeah,
I guess,
but yeah, I guess
but I'm also very excited with this.
That's great to hear. I mean, if it's breaking through to motorsport, we're delighted, Lucas. Yeah, but
Well,
obviously,
they don't talk a lot about this, what we're discussing right now. Like when I speak to my friends and my racing colleagues, they also think I'm crazy. So I guess they will slowly, as I keep sending them news and things to watch, they are slowly understanding these technologies.
yeah,
You have to send them over to Longevity.Technology Unlocked.
Actually, I will.
So you can tell them all the secrets.
I would definitely do. And actually, I would send also to a few friends.
That's right. Nicely done, Nina. So, I mean, I guess, motorsport does rely a lot on telemetry, obviously a lot of continuous feedback. Do you see human health adopting that model? We've talked about testing and biomarkers, but thinking about obviously like real-time monitoring, cognitive state monitoring, sleep quality, nervous system load. Can we start to learn from some of the tech and the approaches in motorsport to optimizing regular humans as you start to think about what's possible in the biotech sphere? These digital twin technologies that are available to us now. I mean, can we integrate with what's happening in motorsport, do you think?
Let me roll back and create another connection there, which I think is interesting. I think statistically, on average, the technology that are most important for extend average health and lifespan is the decarbonization of our cars in cities, right? So improving the air quality.
Yes.
So this is something people don't pay a lot of attention to, the air quality in cities, or not as much as they should, because it's basically pulling our average life expectancy lower, especially when you have polluted cities. Like I'm in Sao Paulo right now, it's moderate polluted, but Delhi and Shanghai and so on. So the electrification, which is what Formula E stands for, right? We are working on the next generation of electrification of powertrains that will encompass the commercial vehicles in the future. If all the cars were electric and we eliminate air pollution, that will push, I think it's the main thing that motorsport could do to push the average lifespan and health span up. So this is a core technology.
Yeah, is that
Combustion.
part of your UN activity, Lucas? I mean,
Yes, we join up with UN, especially for me. There is a lot of talk about climate change, and climate change gets the spotlights. But in actual life improvement, for me, is way more important the decarbonization of the transition for electric mobility than the climate change itself. Because when you look at climate change, vehicles they only count for like 3%, 5%, depending on the matrix, how you produce electricity is complicated, but it's only a small part of the whole equation, right?
Yeah.
Of carbon emissions. But the other problems, the pollutants, the carbon monoxides, the nitrous oxides, the sulfur oxides that you get out of the combustion in cities where people live, that's for me the main problem and the most important one when you electrify the fleet. In COVID, I guess everybody that had any uh, uh, breathing problem in big cities, they were like relieved for whatever how many months because there was no cars on the street, so the air quality became so much better out of a sudden. So imagine if we actually could live in cities that the electrification is mainstream and then the air pollution goes really low. That will improve the life of the most people, in my view, especially in very very dense populated cities like Delhi, Shanghai, Tokyo, or even the European ones. London quality of air is it's not that great. But then talking about your question, which is the technology, yes, I think there is a lot of algorithms. There is a lot of models that we are working in racing, that we're trying to create virtual twins. We're trying to model mathematically, because a simulator is nothing more than a mathematical model of the reality of the physics of the racing car. So if we use this technology, if we can improve this technology and then create, for example, which is I think is happening now, right? They are trying to create the mathematical model of how a cell works, right?
Yes.
They're trying to do like a cell simulator or a cell model to model every single protein and metabolic interaction and ATP production and mitochondrial function in the cell there. I think when you do that, and then you can actually run experiments that are very realistic. Now you can find new drugs, you can reverse aging, you can you can improve mitochondrial healing, and whatever you want to do, and you can model that. I think the acceleration, you can run millions of experiments in one day, right? Instead of waiting for the results biologically. So I think this type of technology also will improve a lot.
This is really the dream, because as a scientist, I had to sit through the pain of waiting all of those weeks and months to get results. So being able to do that analysis in an instant would be, honestly, there would be so many scientists that we're like lining up for this. And when we do have these digital twins and we have this sort of like continuous biometric monitoring, all these maybe tools that you can even put into the car that are lightweight, that can monitor you all the time, what sort of improvements do you think that will bring to athletic careers and athletic performance?
I was actually I was in a Google Cloud talk the other day talking about exactly this. So basically, how can we improve the autonomous so a parenthesis there, autonomous cars, they will be better drivers. So the end game is actually no human driving anything, right? Let the autonomous actually do the driving or but considering we still have a sport and we want to use humans to see which humans are the best, right? How do we use AI and how do you use technology to make the driver the best possible? Directly or indirectly? What I mean directly? Directly is systems like the ABS on your car, that when you brake, it prevents the wheels from locking. So you have better braking efficiency. It's nothing that you do. It's basically a technology on the braking system that is refined there. Level 2, 3 autonomous driving is the forefront of the technology nowadays, like the Tesla reactions, like there's a crash in front of you, the Tesla brake by itself, quicker reaction, or it's dark, you cannot see a deer passing or whatever, with the camera, the LiDAR can see it and will stop. These are directly technologies that will be implemented up to a point that the car will drive just itself. But for the human, yes, you could create. One of the things I'm creating right now, that I want to create, at least I'm discussing on how to do it, is getting a model, a reinforcement learning model, and throwing all my data from my 20 years of racing into this model and creating a virtual twin of me. And then, for example, when I go to my next race, which is Mexico, and I will go to the simulator next week, normally I spend one whole day learning the track, trying new corners, trying new braking, trying new settings. But imagine if I can do 1,000,000 days. Like you, I'm constrained by my biological time, right? I need to be there driving. So I can do a lap of 1 minute. It takes me a minute to do it. But imagine I have a virtual twin that can do 1,000,000 laps. It optimizes to my possible limit, not a limit, my limit. And then I have a reference, which is 1,000,000 laps of Lucas driving there. And then when I'm driving, I'm trying to get there. Right now, I compare with my teammate, I compare with my previous lap. There is not a benchmark. There is an ideal benchmark, but it's not me. It's not with my latencies. It's not with my techniques. It's not with my biases. It's not with my preferences. So if you create a virtual twin of me, you can do 1,000,000 laps, and then I have a benchmark to become a better driver of myself, right? And you can create statistical analysis of where do I need to improve and how, and I will learn faster about anything.
I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, I'm fascinated by the singularity, when we are fully integrated with, the AI and the quantum technology that's coming down the line with brain-computer interfaces and things like that. So it's fascinating to hear you saying that, Lucas, from a perspective of that, is obviously something that you feel might be possible soon. And, we know, and we've talked a lot about, your regimes and the stresses that you've put yourself through and how you manage all of that, all of these feedback loops and this continuous adaptation that you're doing. Is there one principle from the racing world that we could apply, to everyday life for everyday human beings that would help improve health span and obviously their ultimate lifespan?
That's a very hard question. I have to think about that to give you a proper answer. I cannot just do it like that.
I know distilling everything down into one is really hard. I know.
Yeah, we discussed a lot of things. But again, I would give the same two advices that I gave, or this single advice, which is probably the best, I would say, not for lifespan, but also to control better your emotions, to have less stress, to control your stress, or to use the stress as something positive instead of negative. I think everybody goes through that. And going back to racing, right? Of course, I depend on my car. Of course, I depend on a lot of things. But there are only a few things, or a limited amount of things I can control myself. So I rather spend my effort and time controlling these things and preventing those. The analogy for lifespan is like, maybe I have a cancer, maybe I don't know. But if I can know in advance, if I have a more likelihood of developing this cancer or that cancer, I can actually use my available time to focus on the things that are really matter, that on average will increase my life and my lifespan and my health span. So in racing, for example, we cannot control all the variables, but then you have to you have to delegate, or in this case, to the engineers, and you have to focus on what you can control, putting the effort there. And in my life, it's the same. I do my genetic analysis. I did this MRI. I do my BRDC1 and 2 genetic testing to see if I have more likelihood of one type of cancer or another. Like me, for example, right? All my family has a history of heart diseases and very little cancer. So I do a heart exam every year. I try to see, are there calcium plaques on my arteries? Are there this is where I focus. My skin is brown. I mean, a very small likelihood that I have, if I take a little bit of care, that I will have skin cancer. So anybody in my family had it. So I also go to the dermatologist, but I take much more effort into the things that are more likely to happen because of this data that I collected from myself. So I think the understanding where these likelihoods are more effective and putting your effort and your energy there are probably, which is called optimization, is probably what I learned in racing that you can actually take into your health life that will increase your chances of having a better and more, it will not go to zero, but will increase the chances of you having a better life.
Yeah, sound advice, Lucas. Thank you.
Thank you very
Lucas,
much.
it's been really an incredible conversation. Thanks for giving us all of your deep insights about performance under extreme conditions and how that's helped your recovery, how that's helped you with your current health, and how that's going to be for your long-term health. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah, thanks. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you hit the follow button so you never miss a deep dive into the science of living better and longer.
And if something in this conversation inspired you, share it with somebody who cares about their health span as much as you do. It really helps our mission.
Great. So thanks for listening. And Lucas, you've been great. So any closing words?
No, I was just going to say thank you very much. Thank to everybody that is listening to us right now, that follows the podcast. I will definitely share this podcast with a lot of people that I know that I have a lot of interest in this subject. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Nina. It has been a big pleasure. My social medias are at Lucas di Grassi, pretty much everywhere. If anybody likes racing or has any question, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
I'm sure they will, Lucas. It's been really fascinating. And so thank you, Lucas. Thank you everyone for listening to Longevity Technology Unlocked, and we'll see you next time.